I'm Rick Kaler, and thanks for joining me. What is capitalism? How does it work? For some time now, I've been meaning to write a column on that particular topic, but it's really seemed to be a daunting task. Probably fit more for an economist than a financial planner. But recently, I remembered this story from my childhood. We were visiting my grandparents. Probably it was about in 1965. I was 10 and my brother was 7. Our grandfather hired us to weed his garden, paying us a dime apiece. Now that seems like a pretty paltry sum today, but it wasn't such a bad wage for a couple of kids at the time. After all, a bottle of soda only cost a nickel. We started off to work. The day was hot, it was humid, it was in Missouri. The garden really was big. I kept thinking about getting a bottle of soda and sitting in the shade over there on the porch. Pulling all those weeds really seemed like a huge price to pay for the reward of 10 cents. Then I had a brilliant idea. I said, hey Dave, how would you like to earn an extra nickel? He was interested. I offered him the opportunity to weed my half the garden for my half of the dime. Seemed like a good idea to him, and we made the deal. So David weeded the entire garden. I bought a bottle of Coke with my remaining nickel, sat in the shade, and watched him do it. When the weeding was finished, he was tired and hot, but he had 15 cents to show for his labors. I was broke, but I'd enjoyed a relaxing afternoon with my soda instead of having to work in the hot sun. Seemed like a win-win situation to me, but my grandfather didn't see it the same way. In his view, I had taken advantage of my innocent younger brother by coercing and manipulating him into doing his work for me. Not sure that my granddad ever forgave me. I suppose there may have been a tiny grain of truth in his opinion. I mean, after all, I was 2 years older than my brother. But I don't remember any bullying or manipulation being involved. I simply offered him a deal, and he took it. The transaction involved a willing seller and a willing buyer. One thing of value, his work, was exchanged for another thing of value, my nickel. He benefited from receiving more money. I benefited from not having to perform manual labor and buying a Coke. Thinking about it all these years later, it occurred to me that what I did was exactly the same thing my grandfather did. Each of us paid someone else to do a task we didn't want to do. And we got the job done at the lowest cost to ourselves. For Granddad to accuse me of using my position as the oldest to take advantage of my brother wasn't quite fair. After all, one could say he used his position as a grandfather to get cheap labor out of a couple of little kids. I suppose one of his aims was to teach us about the value of hard work and the satisfaction of being paid for our efforts. I think the other aim was to get his garden weeded for as little as possible. The lesson I learned, though, wasn't exactly the one that he had intended to teach me. The whole process, though, was a small example of capitalism at work. It was a lesson that I took to heart. My brother must have done the same, because he's still a hard worker and he's certainly been a very successful capitalist. And when his son was a teenager, and I hired him to do my yard work, I had to pay him a lot more than a nickel. Thanks for joining me.